Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge. Today we continue our combined World in Flames Days of Decision campaign playthrough by picking up with the March-April 1938 turn. Last time out, we saw 1938 get off to a bit of a quick start. We had a number of major powers bid in the political phase. Of those, we saw Germany do her first gear up as well as France. So the build points are starting to roll in at a little quicker pace now, and I expect we will see this trend of activity ramping up continue with today's episode and the next several as we move throughout 1938. I think in my experience with doing these combined games, 1938 seems to be sort of the pivotal year, but really the year where things start to pick up and get into high gear. So it'll be, I think, interesting for us to see how things unfold here in the current game. And since we've got a lot that is probably going to be happening here, let's just jump right to it and get into the political phase here for March-April. Well, the political frenzy that started the year off has actually continued with this turn and even intensified a bit. I guess just a quick review of the money on hand for each of the major powers going into March-April. Japan has 6 yen currently. Next up is the Commonwealth with 3. China and the Soviets both have 2. Germany and Italy with 1. The United States has 0, and France, still trying to dig out from underneath the big expense of her gear up, is stuck at -4. Now, despite that, we have 6 of the 8 major powers that actually bid for a political option, and so things are looking a little interesting. Germany, even though she's only got 1, she went ahead and bid 4, so there's something obviously that she really wants to get done this turn. The Italians got back into the game by bidding 1. Japan bids 3. The USSR, if you recall, last time selected, they wanted to gear up, but they didn't have enough money, even if using all of their credit limit. So they ended up just getting the bonus bid points, of which they got 8, thanks to their political effectiveness of 4. And with that in mind, and their second position here, they know they're going to get another 3 + 3 modifier to their bid. They've only got 2. They've got to be real careful about how much they spend here. So they're only bidding 1, but they're going to rely on the bonus bid points and their modifier to get them into a good low position. The Commonwealth, who had the political phase end early on them last turn, they're going to get, as a result of that, 3 bonus bid points here from their political effectiveness, but they also want to make sure they can get their gear up in this turn and not put it off for another turn, because right now they're producing 6 build points. After the gear up, when they go from 1/4 production multiple up to 1/2, they'll be producing 11 build points. So every turn that goes by without the Commonwealth being able to get that gear up accomplished is costing them 5 build points. So with that in mind, they are putting in a rather sizable bid of 3. And then finally, we have China, of all people, deciding to throw a 1 bid in to try to get some political option done on their end. So what this all shakes out to look like when we add in the bonus bids and the modifiers is that the USSR, who bid 1, they got 8 bonus bid points, and they have a +3 modifier for their position. That gives them a grand total of 12, and that is going to place them in first. Now, there was a brief consideration by Stalin of maybe trying to double up and get a twofer on this by bidding for 2 political options. 12 is probably the second highest total we've seen so far, after the 15 for Germany last turn. The problem for the Soviets is they are really strapped for cash right now, knowing that their gear up is going to be costing them 10. Plus, the boss has made it very clear that the Soviet gear up is to occur this turn. He does not want to see them see what happened to the Commonwealth last turn happen to the Soviets this turn. So the Soviets, the lack of funds and the overriding desire to make sure that they get to do their political option are going to keep all 12 of their bid total on a single political option, and that is good enough to put them into the first position here. Next up, we had Germany, who bid 4, relying also on her high bid modifier here of +4 from the first position, gives her a total of 8. The Commonwealth bid 3. They got 3 bonus bid points for kind of getting shafted last turn when the political phase ended early, and then with another 2 for their bid modifier position, that gave them 8 as well. So Germany and the Commonwealth are tied, but Germany's political effectiveness is much higher than the Commonwealth, so that's going to break that tie and see Germany fall into second position. But it does see the Commonwealth improve slightly to third position. And again, they're kind of sweating it out here because that 3 was a considerable bid for them. And if the Soviets or Germans end up ending the political phase once again on them, it's going to irritate them tremendously. So we'll see if the Commonwealth is able to get an opportunity to play their option. After the Commonwealth, we have 3 more bidders. We've got in fourth position Japan, who bid 3. She has no bonus bid points, but she does get a +2 here for a total of 5, which, like I said, is good enough for fourth. That's going to slide them up there. Japan doesn't feel too good about that, but they knew, given the Soviet bonuses and the Commonwealth bonuses, that they probably weren't going to get one of the top positions. Then in fifth place, we have the Italians, who bid 1, get a +1 for a total of 2. And then the last of the bidding nations is China, who bid 1. She really can't afford to do too much more than that. She only got a +0, so that 1 + 0 is still good enough to put her in the sixth position. And then finally, France and the United States are the only 2 major powers that did not bid. France's +3 bid modifier is going to outdo the United States +1. So France drops all the way down to 7th here, while the United States slips into 8th. And we'll put the last bid marker way down here next to China at the 6th position. So a number of nations trying to get something done here politically this turn. And for a change, we're actually going to start off with the Soviets. Well, it's no secret what the Soviets are going to play this turn. It's the option they wanted to do last turn but could not afford. That is Russian option 2, gear up. You can see the cost is 10 money. They currently have 1 ruble left after their bid of 1, so that's going to drop them down to -9, just about maxing out their credit limit of 10. The U.S. entry on this, the U.S. isn't terribly keen on it. That's going to be +9, raising the Soviet U.S. entry level to +15. And then, as you can see, there are a number of minor countries that this is going to affect. This gear up is a little more substantial than a lot of the others. The Soviets' at start production multiple has been 1/10. This is going to raise them to 1/4. So they'll go from 3 build points to 8 build points, so almost tripling their production each and every turn. That's going to guarantee the Red Army growing a lot faster than we have seen it, and we may even see the Soviets sort of branch out and start getting a little more active in the international political scene. So what I'm going to do now is, having recorded the U.S. entry, I'll go ahead and place the control markers for the minor country effects, and then the Soviets are going to have to pick a minor country to activate, and we'll do that over on the maps. Well, there weren't any necessarily really strong reactions to the Soviet gear up, although it was rather widespread. Obviously, Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, even into the Middle East, all had opinions on it, and they were almost all universally negative. The exceptions to that were that the Yugoslavs liked it enough to give the Soviets +2 influence there, and Bulgaria, the Soviets picked up +2 influence. They also picked up +1 influence in Spain, which combined with the previous influence there now gives them a net total of +2. And they're tempted to activate Spain to maybe try and draw the Republic sort of away from France's influence and more into their sphere. But I think they're going to wait on that and maybe see what happens in the Civil War here before necessarily committing themselves real heavily to that. And I think instead they are going to go ahead and activate Bulgaria here with the +2. And so we'll head over to the status display and we'll resolve this and see what happens with Bulgaria. Over here on the status display, you can see Bulgaria is located here. Germany, I think, activated them recently, probably in the last couple of turns, and started to draw them in towards the fascists there. The Soviets, given the proximity of Bulgaria and the strategic location of it, would rather not see Bulgaria end up as a fascist satellite. So with our lone Soviet control marker to resolve, you see it's a +2, which will move Bulgaria towards the Soviet Union 1 hex, and that'll put them in here with the Baltic states, and I believe that's Ireland on the bottom there. So a little bit of a tug of war going on between the Soviets and Germany as far as Bulgaria and the Baltic states go right now, with neither side really having more success than the other. And now we're going to see if the Soviets can manage to piss off the entire rest of the world by ending the political phase after just their option being played. So this is anything but a 1 to see it continue. Here we go. Once again, they have tempted fate, but the 2 is good enough to allow the phase to continue, and that puts Germany on the clock, and we will see what Germany was so eager to get done that they actually went ahead and bid 4 for their bid. Well, here we go. Germany is going to be selecting German option 7, Austrian Anschluss, and coincidentally, it actually happens to be right on time historically, March 1938. This is going to cost Germany 4 money. So after the 4 that she bid for, that she spent for her bid, which dropped her to -3, this additional 4 is going to lower her all the way down to -7. So an expensive option for her this turn when she doesn't necessarily have a lot of money in the bank, but she's willing to go out on credit because this is going to improve her situation in a couple of different ways. Now we can see there are some prerequisites, and it says it may only play this option if Italy has not played her option 7 in days of decision. An Austrian Anschluss is possible with either Germany or Italy. Italy has not played the Italian option 7 yet, and that's primarily because, number one, Italy has Austria stacked with her, so Italy could actually just simply align Austria if she found herself at war and then have access to the Austrian force pool units. But Italy also has not played her Italian-Austrian Anschluss, because she doesn't meet the prerequisites yet. So Germany was faster on the draw here, was able to get her option 7 played. The second prerequisite is that Germany's production multiple is 3/4 or higher, and Germany just did her gear up last turn to move her from 1/2 to 3/4. And then it says Germany's initiative position is less than every major power allied to Austria. There is one major power that has an alliance with Austria, and that is Italy. Italy is in the 5th position, as we found out in the initiative determination, which means Germany meets prerequisite numbers or letter C. And then the last one is that Austria is not at war, including a civil war, conquered or aligned by any major power, which is not the case. So Germany meets all 4 prerequisites. There's going to be some minor country reaction, as one would expect to something like this. As far as the U.S. entry goes, it's only a +3 because it's 1938, so kind of a big ho-hum from the U.S. Apparently the U.S. public is not terribly interested in something they see as an internal issue for the German speakers. Not even sure how many Americans could even find Austria on a world map. And that is not meant to be a slight to our good friends in Austria. Much more a commentary on the state of the U.S. education system. Anyway, moving on. What does this option actually do? Well, after playing this option, Austria becomes part of the German home country. Austria is no longer has an independent partisan value, and then, just as interesting for the Germans, Germany receives 1 infantry corps and 1 mountain unit, if available, to arrive as reinforcements next turn. So she's going to pick up an infantry corps, and I believe there is 1 mountain corps in the German force pools right now, which just those 2 units alone, that's 7 build points worth of units that she's getting for free, and that really takes the sting out of the 4 money she spent on the bid and the 4 for this option, which was a total of 8. So in a way, she's getting a lot of that money back, and she's not going to have to wait to build those units. They're going to show up next turn. So what I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and I'll fish out the reinforcement units. I'll place them on the production circle, and then I'll go ahead and mark the minor reactions, and then Germany will get to select a minor country to activate. Well, not surprisingly, there was some sharp reaction from the minor countries to the Anschluss, and pretty much all of it was in Central and Eastern Europe. Now, the Belgians reacted with a -2, and the Czechs reacted with a -4. And go figure, you have a couple of small countries adjacent to Germany not being very keen on the Germans swallowing up a minor country that borders Germany. So we can kind of understand those reactions. Poland actually liked it with a +1. Romania and Yugoslavia also gave the Germans a +1 influence. And so now Germany is looking about the map for a minor to activate. We can actually remove the control markers that are in Austria, since Austria is now part of the German home country. And this is nice because it gives Germany another factory, which is good, and an oil resource to go along with that factory. So that's going to give the Germans an extra production point right there, and crucially an oil resource which is quite rare here in Europe. So the Anschluss is going to be paying dividends both immediately as well as down the road for Germany. But when she's looking around for a minor country to activate, there's not a lot of good options for her right now, because most of the world reacts poorly to the Germans gearing up and then absorbing their neighbors. I think that we are probably going to go with the Baltic states actually up here. Not necessarily because of any strong strategic interest, at least right now, but more from the fact that the Germans currently have +3 influence there, and the Soviets have -2. So the Germans should be able to get some value out of both of these chits. And to find out how much value, let's head over to the status display. Here on the status display, you can see the Baltic states are located just here. I think initially the Soviets were trying to woo them and got them moving in their direction before the Germans decided they wanted to kind of pull them back into their sphere. So right now we've got a +3 German and a -2 Soviet control marker to resolve. And again, I don't think the order is going to matter very much here, but let's just go ahead and resolve the Soviet marker. That -2 will move the Baltic states 1 hex away from the Soviets, and then the German +3, it would have been nice if the Germans had maybe another 2 influence, and perhaps they should have waited to activate the Baltic states, hoping that they would be able to pick up another 2 positive influence. But as it is, the 3 is good enough to get them 1 hex there, and then the 1 remaining is not going to be enough to get them into the hex here with Sweden across the boundary. So the Baltic states did end up moving a fair distance closer to Germany, and again away from the Soviet Union. We'll see if Germany can have any more success with getting the Baltics actually into the fascist ideology with them. And we'll see how the Soviets react to this move as well. I'm sure they're not terribly keen on the idea of smattering of fascist satellites on their northwestern border. So that's going to do it for the German political option, and therefore we need now to roll to see if the political phase is going to end as a result of that. And we do have a -1 because of the Soviet option played prior to this, which means on a 2 or less the political phase will end. And the Germans roll a 10, which means the political phase continues, and the Commonwealth, which has been kind of sweating out these last 2 die rolls, is now actually going to be able to play her political option, and we know that that is going to be a gear up for the Commonwealth. Here is the Commonwealth option 2 gear up, and we've seen gear ups before now a few times, so we know how this works. The only variable here is the cost, which varies by major power. In this case, it's 10 for the Commonwealth. That's going to drop them to a -10 right now, but they should be able to make that back here in the next turn or two. We've got a number of minor country effects here, and you can see the U.S. entry is a +8 here for the Commonwealth. This is going to move their production multiple from 1/4 to 1/2, and I expect we'll see a rather sizable increase in their build points from here on out. So what I'll do now is go ahead and record the minor country effects and the U.S. entry effect. Then we'll select a minor country for the Commonwealth to activate, so I'll meet you over at the maps. Well, the Commonwealth is not a very popular major power with minor countries right now, which doesn't leave her a lot of very good options for activating a country. She obviously doesn't want to push any minor countries away from herself or her other Democrat major powers. For instance, Belgium, she's got a -1, which is no big deal. She's -4 in the Netherlands. She's -2 in Norway and Sweden. In Ireland, she's a -6. Turkey is a -3. The only places she really has any prospects of nudging a minor in the right direction are Saudi Arabia, where she does have +3 influence, and Yugoslavia, where she's got +2, as well as Romania. I think what we'll do, Yugoslavia also has +2 Soviet influence, so we don't necessarily want to get them moving in that direction. I think maybe we'll go ahead in here and activate Romania and see if we can't try to bring Romania a little bit closer to the Democrat ideology, perhaps a little closer to France. Again, Romania is one of those countries that France would like to see as part of the Little Entente here in Eastern Europe. So let's activate Romania. We'll head over to the status display and we'll resolve these 5 control markers for Romania. On the status display, you can see Romania is located right here, just about midway between the Democrats and fascist ideologies. And even though we have 5 control markers, 4 of them are going to be a 1 or a -1. So we can resolve the Italian 1, which isn't going to be budging Romania. Neither will the French +1. We have a German -1. That's going to get wasted, as well as the Soviet -1, leaving us just the Commonwealth +2. So that will be enough to move Romania 1 hex towards the Commonwealth. And that's going to do it for the Romanian activation and the Commonwealth political option. Last thing, again, is to see if the Commonwealth manages to end the political phase here. We have a -2 modifier now because of the Soviet and German political options that have been played. So I'm going to need a 4 or better to keep the phase alive. And a 7 will do precisely that. Which brings us to Japan next. So we'll see what the Japanese have in mind for their political option this turn. Well, here we go. The global peace has been shattered as Japan is selecting option 6, Peking Bridge incident. What this option will do is put Japan at war with China. Now, this varies a little bit from an outright declaration of war, which would be option 4 here. You can see down here, its war. So why bother with doing the Peking Bridge incident versus just the straight up declaration of war? Well, one of the issues is you can see the declaration of war, option 4, costs 6 if you are declaring war on a major power, whereas this particular option is only going to cost the Japanese 2 money. So she saves 4 money on the declaration of war, what is essentially a declaration of war. And more importantly, the U.S. entry and minor country effects are greatly reduced by selecting this option versus just a straight out declaration of war on China. You can see here the U.S. entry for 1938-39 is a plus 10, which is considerable. If she had instead chosen Japan option 4 and just declared war on China, it would have been a plus 23. So this option allows Japan to take less than half of the usual U.S. entry cost hit to the U.S. entry, and therefore hopefully delay the U.S. entry into the war that much longer. Now, it does come with a couple of restrictions that the normal declaration of war isn't going to have. We'll start off here with the prerequisites. Japan may only play this option if either Japan's initiative is less than China's or Japan has previously played Japan 8. Well, in this case, we have her initiative is in the 4th position. China's is in the 6th, so she is less than China. And then Japan option 8 is Tojo takes over, which just occurred last turn. Now, honestly, Japan probably should have gone to war with China last year. Not sure what they were waiting on or what they were thinking, but apparently now that Tojo has taken over, he has decided that we need to strike and strike now. Had they gone to war just even a few turns ago, they probably could have caught the Chinese in a much weaker disposition and maybe have had an easier time of it. So we'll see how things go in China. Under the effects here, you'll see that this is going to increase China's production multiple level to 1/4. She's currently sitting at 1/10, so China's going to get a boost basically for free. However, you do not increase the Chinese political effectiveness. Normally, when another major power declares war on you, the major power that is being declared war upon will see their political effectiveness increased by 1, but that's not the case here with the Peking Bridge incident. Also, their production multiple level increase if certain countries declare war on other specific major powers. You will see the production multiple level increase, which with Japan, with a full declaration of war, the Japanese production multiple level, I believe, would have gone up to 1/2. So we're keeping it at 1/4. Another benefit of selecting option 6 versus the full-on declaration of war with option 4. However, playing this option puts Japan at war with China. Japan, but not China, is still restricted by World in Flames Rule 9.1 for the first 12 turns of war, unless at war with another major power in the meantime. What this is Japan is going to be restricted to combined impulses. This is very similar to the old limited war option. If you've been playing World in Flames over the past several editions, you'll recall that Japan and China usually start, well, they do start the 1939 scenario at war with one another, but Japan is in a limited war situation, and she can opt to then go to full war with China, but at a pretty good-sized U.S. entry hit. Here, Days of Decision has basically option 6 here to take the role of that old limited war status between Japan and China. So for 12 turns, that's 2 years now, Japan is going to be restricted in not being able to do land impulse or naval impulse, what have you. She's going to be strictly stuck with the combined impulse type. And again, that's probably the biggest restriction on this, but it does give Japan some benefits that we talked about just previously, as far as U.S. entry and minor country effects and even cost. Beyond that, you'll see here it says you may play this option at the beginning of one of your impulses as a reactionary war option. I haven't really talked about reactionary options in Days of Decision. There are some options that may be played as a reactionary option. What that means is you can play it not just in the political phase where we are now, but you can also play it in the declaration of war phase during the World in Flames portion of the turn. Now, if you play the option, let's say you decide to declare war on either a minor country or major power during the declaration of war step in the World in Flames portion of the turn, the next political phase, you must then play the declare war option, and you cannot play any other option until you have played that option to satisfy the declaration of war that occurred during the turn rather than in the political phase. And you can see here the fact that we have played this option during the political step. Japan must declare limited war on China in their first impulse this turn. And in either case, we're going to apply the effects, minor country, U.S. entry, etc., at the time war is declared. So we're not going to put out any of the minor country effects. We're not going to increase the U.S. entry level until that actual declaration of war occurs during the first impulse that Japan has in March, April 1938. So with that said, we will have a lot more action now, I think, on the board, at least in Asia, and we'll get to see our first major power versus major power conflict. Now, now Japan does get to activate a minor country still, so I'm going to go take a look and see which minor country she's going to want to activate, and then we'll resolve that on the status display. We'll also have to roll to see if Japan ends the political phase, because we have two more major powers that have bid to do an option this turn. That's Italy and then China. So we'll see if they get an opportunity to do that. Well, like the Commonwealth, Japan does not have a lot of good options for activating countries. Most of the influence that she has in minor countries is in fact negative influence, so she's not terribly popular on the world stage right now. I suppose she could activate Siam. Siam is not very happy with either the Commonwealth or France right now. Both of them have some negative influence in there, but that wouldn't necessarily move Siam any closer, directly towards Japan. So it would be of, marginal benefit right now. Instead, I think what Japan's going to do, you can see here, there's a lot of the Central and South American countries are influenced both positively and negatively by Japanese actions in Days of Decision. And she does have +2 influence here in Mexico, combined with currently -2 influence on the part of the United States. So we may be able to shift that Mexican marker out of the center of that neutral zone and maybe a little bit towards the fascist side. Certainly getting some kind of an ally here in the Western Hemisphere would be advantageous for Japan in the long term if she finds herself at war with the United States. So I think we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to gather up all 5 control markers here in Mexico, and we're going to head over to the status display to resolve them. Now, the Mexico marker is located right here, smack dab in the middle of the neutral zone, and we've got quite a number of control markers to resolve. We'll lay those out here. Now, we do have 5 of them. Again, I don't think it's going to make a big difference the order in which these are resolved. So we'll get rid of the ones that aren't going to have any impact at all. So that's going to be the -1 for the Soviets. That's not going to move the marker. The +1 for the Commonwealth will not move it, and neither will the +1 for Germany. The United States has a -2, so if we resolve that one, that's going to move it 1 hex away from the United States, which will put it here in the Bulgaria hex, and then we have the +2 towards Japan, and we'll bring the Mexican marker 1 more hex here. And again, there's a long way to go before Mexico makes it just even into the fascist ideology, let alone stacked over here with Japan. But it is something at least that the Japanese can show for this turn. And again, when we do the declarations of war step in the World in Flames portion of the turn, that's when I will go ahead and implement the minor country effects and the U.S. entry effect. So For now, we just need to see if Japan ends the political phase with a die roll, and we're getting up there. This is now the fourth major power to go. We've got three political options that have been played previously, so we're going to need a 5 or better to allow the Italians an opportunity to do something. And the 1 puts an end to that. So what we're going to note for next turn, the Italians will get some bonus bid points as well as the Chinese, both of them equal to their political effectiveness. In this case, the Italians are looking at 3 additional bid points and the Chinese 1 additional bid point. That is going to wrap up the political phase here, and now I will move on to roll the weather for March, April, and we'll roll initiative, which could be important here given the developments in Asia. We'll review the reinforcements that are going to be coming on map this turn, and then we will jump right into the first impulse. Well, the weather roll ended up being an 8, which is considerably better than it has been. It's going to be rain in the Arctic, but fine everywhere else. On the initiative rolls, the fascists rolled very well. They rolled a 7, with their +2 gave them a 9. The communists ended up coming in second on the initiative with a roll of 5, and the Democrats ended up dead last with a 3. That was after they rolled a 4. They have a -1 modifier, which dropped it to a 3. The communists actually decided to go after the Democrats, and the fascists, especially with the Japanese declaration of war, have decided to go first. So the initiative order for March, April 38 is going to be fascists, Democrats, and then communists. On the production circle, we've got a few things arriving this turn. You can see we'll start with Spain. The Spanish are going to get the Franco headquarters. They also get a fighter, but they don't have any pilots to put in it, so it's going to have to go into the reserve pool for now. I believe the pilots are going to arrive next turn. You can see them right here. For the Soviets, they're going to get a decent infantry army. The Germans are going to get some Bf 109Bs. I'll place those here in the reserve pool for now. They do have some pilots available, so they probably will find their way on map. Germans are also going to get the Blücher into the construction pool. The Commonwealth get a pilot, and I'll mark that on the track. And the Japanese get another carrier plane. That'll go into the pool for now. Commonwealth also gets a convoy point. The United States sees the Langley come on map now, and the Commonwealth is going to get HMS Formidable into the construction pool to join Indomitable right now. That's going to do it for the March-April reinforcements. Now we will have the reserves being called out for both China and Japan now that they're at war. So we're going to see a number of units coming out on map as well once we get to the declaration of war steps. So I'll get the reinforcements placed, and I believe we are actually, speaking of which, we are up to the declare war step. So we'll see what this looks like over on the maps. We're going to start the first impulse of the turn here in Asia, where during the declare war step, Japan will declare war on China via the Peking Bridge incident political option she just played. Now, one of the reasons you have seen the builds by all the major powers be dominated by naval units so far is that every major power has a number of reserves that they can call out when they go to war with another major power. These reserves are called out in your impulse according to the rules. So for Japan is going to have an opportunity to call out her reserves this impulse. These are placed just like reinforcements, except that they will go face down. And you can see there are 9 corps and army-sized reserves here, along with 1 division, which is a little garrison division here. Some of these units are quite good. There's a very good Imperial Guard Marine Corps. We've got a very good infantry army, 2 infantry armies actually, another garrison army, and then we've got several militia, some of which are not bad. The Tokyo militia is a nice unit. You've got Osaka here, as well as Taihoku, Seoul, and Harbin. So first thing I'm going to do is going to set up the reserves, and again, these reserves will go on map, but they will go face down. Once the reserves are placed, we'll pick up with the perform actions portion of the turn. And Japan, because this is a limited war in China, she is going to be restricted to conducting combined impulses. However, she is no longer considered neutral, so a naval move for her will consist of a task force that begins in the same location and ends in the same location. We won't be going ship by ship. Now, the first question for Japan is, when she selects her combined impulse, does she want to pay the oil to fully move all of her available units during the impulse, or is she going to not pay for it and either pay on a unit by unit basis or restrict her actions to just that one free oil dependent unit? And I think given what she has on map right now and how much she is looking to move, I think she's going to forego paying the 7/10 of an oil for the full combined impulse, and she's either going to try and skate by using only one oil dependent unit, or she'll pay on a unit by unit basis. I think there are only 1 or 2 units that the Japanese are going to be looking to move this particular impulse. So once I get the reserve set up, we'll pick back up again with the start of the Japanese action step. With the reserves set up, you can see most of the reserves are going to end up here in the home islands. The militia units had to set up in the cities that they're named after. We are now ready to begin Japanese operations. We don't have any port attacks or any naval air missions. Naval movement, I think they do have one naval move they're going to do, and they're going to have the transports here embark the Special Naval Landing Forces. They're going to go 1, 2, and end up here in Taihoku, where the Marines will debark and the transport is turned face down. That's going to do it for their naval movement. No naval combat, no strategic bombardment, but we are up to ground strike missions. The Japanese are going to take advantage of the surprise impulse here, and they are going to fly their bombers here on a ground strike mission into the Tinsin hex. Now, surprise means that ground strikes will roll 1 extra die per unit. So we'll be rolling 2 dice for each of the 3 units in the Chinese stack there, hoping to get lucky here and get at least 1 on the die. Resolving the ground strikes, you can see we have 1 bomber here with a tactical factor of 1. We have the 3 targets here. We're just going to roll top to bottom. That's kind of my standard operating procedure whenever we're doing ground strikes. And we will be rolling 1 extra die, so I'm just going to roll both dice at once. We need a 1 to invert to the target unit. So starting with the 87th Chinese Division, we have a 10 and a 3, so a miss there. 2 5s, so the 6th Army is all right, and then the last chance to get something inverted, and a little bit closer, working our way down there, 3 and a 4, but again, they all miss. So, an unsuccessful initial strike from the Japanese, but it's not to be it's somewhat expected given the generally poor tactical factors really in all the Japanese bombers. They don't get much better. They're pretty good naval bombers, not so good land bombers. This will have the bomber return to base. I will also have to pay the fuel cost for that, so that's going to cost the Japanese 1/10. I'll pay for that once we get back on map. We'll return the units there, and then we will proceed with the rest of the impulse. What I'm going to do, just for continuity's sake, is we'll run through the entire impulse for the Japanese in Asia, and then we'll go ahead and resolve the European fascist impulse, rather than necessarily going on a strict step-by-step, for instance, doing naval movement in the Pacific, then naval movement in Europe, land movement in Pacific, land movement in Europe, that sort of thing. You get the idea. So we'll finish up in Asia here, and then we'll move on to Europe. With ground strike missions out of the way, we move on to rail movement, of which the Japanese have none, and now land movement. We're limited to 3 land moves, but there's only 1 that the Japanese are going to make, and that is actually with the Marines here in Taihoku. They're going to cross the straits here and land at Fuchao for 4 movement points. And then we'll move on to air transport, no debarking of land units at sea, no invasions or paradrops, which brings us to land combat. Japanese can make one attack, and they are going to make an attack here on Tinsin. And let's see what we have going on here. We have 10 in Port Arthur. We have another 10 combat strengths here in the mountains, and then Umezu and the cavalry make it 28 to a defensive strength of 3 and 4 is 7 and 1 is 8. So we have 28 to 8 are the I guess the raw odds, if you will. There are there's no ground support that's going to be added by the Japanese. There's no naval bombardment. We don't have an invasion going on, and the only question is whether or not the Japanese are going to add some offensive HQ support. And I think they are going to do that because doing so will give them a +1 to the die roll. Chang, even if he's surprised, so he's unable to provide any defensive support in the surprise impulse, but even if he were not surprised, what we would do is we would subtract Chang's 1 reorg value from Umetsu's 3. That would leave us with a net +2. Divide that by 4 is 1/2, which would then round up to 1. So it would be a +1 anyway, even if Chang did lend some support. So in that case, as a Chinese player, the Chinese player would say, no, thank you. It's not going to make any difference. I'm not going to have Chang support the defense. So, but again, because it's a surprise impulse, that's not even an option. We'll go ahead and I guess we'll turn him down just to note that, although I guess technically you could do that at the end of the resolution. But we have a 28 to 8, which is a 3 to 1. There are no modifiers, and now the Japanese have to decide, or the Chinese have to decide whether it's a blitzkrieg or assault table. And I think there's almost no question here. The Chinese are going to keep it on the assault table at 3 to 1. If the Japanese roll a 1, it's going to cost them 2 units for no loss to the Chinese. If they roll a 4, they'll also lose 2 units, but they'll inflict 1 loss on the Chinese. So the Japanese, this is really not all that great of an attack. The Japanese, to clear the hex, they're going to need an 8, 9, or 10. So not a very good chance there. Yeah, so let's go ahead and roll this and see if the Japanese get lucky or if this is going to be a poor start to the offensive. Go ahead and see what the die roll brings here. And here it is, first big attack in China. And it is indeed a big attack. Wow, wasn't expecting that. We have a 9 on the 3 to 1 assault table. That's going to be no attacker losses. It's going to be 2 defender losses and a shatter result. So the 3rd unit will go on the spiral as a reinforcement to arrive next turn. And half of the remaining attacking land units are, they stay face up. So all around an outstanding start to the Japanese offensive here. As we come back in here, the Chinese are going to have to kill 2 units. Well, the first one they're going to lose is definitely the division. So it's cheap, and then we've got a 4-3 or a 3-3. We'll go ahead and lose the 3-3 army, and then this 4-3 is going to end up on the spiral as a reinforcement. The Japanese suffer no losses, and now we just have to see who's going to occupy the city. I think we will go ahead and just have the units here enter, and then finally we have 3, 6, 8 total attacking units, 4 of which may remain face up. So we'll keep these 3 face up, and we'll keep the 5-3 face up as well. So we'll turn the 4-3 face down here. We'll turn the division face down. We'll leave him face up. He's face down, and the cavalry. Do we want to do that? Yeah, I think we'll do that. Or do we? Let's see. I'm just thinking about further possibilities of where we can go from here. There will be some Chinese reinforcements arriving in the Chinese impulse here. They would like to obviously seize Peking if possible. Where can we go from here? This may be it for the Japanese for their first turn, but still not a bad start. We'll definitely take a 9 on our attacks every time. Yeah, I think we'll leave that as is. We'll go with that for now, and I'll go ahead and remove the Chinese to the force pool and the production circle. Following the land combat, it's just air rebases and reorganization. There are no air rebases. We do have a fighter here in Japan, but there's no need for it over in China yet, since the Chinese have no air force to speak of. So we're content to leave the fighters there, and no reorganization to be done. So that's going to wrap up the Japanese first impulse. Now we're going to head to Europe, where the Germans and Italians don't really have much to do. I think the Italians will be using their naval move to bring back the army that they have in Eritrea there. We'll go ahead and have these guys are going to end up moving to the Eastern Med, where they will rebase at the end of the turn back to, there we are, back to Italy, and then we will pick up with the rest of the European impulse here momentarily, which is going to take place in Spain. Here in Spain and Europe, I think things will be a bit anticlimactic after that very successful Japanese attack to kick off their invasion of China. The fascists here are looking at the situation. You know, there are a couple of vulnerable Republican lone corps there, but they are both in mountain hexes, which means their defense is going to be doubled. So the nationalists obviously would like to start whittling down or continue to whittle down the Republican forces. The problem is they don't really have many good attacks. They've got 2, 4 here. That's 6 would be 10. If they moved Franco up, that's 15, 20, 23. They could bring a division in, it'd be 24, maybe even swap him out. That would be 25 is about the best they can do against this hex, which is 4 doubled to 8. However, the Republicans do have an air force, and it has a 1 tack factor, and it's within range to fly ground support. So the defense of this hex could be as high as 9. You're looking at 25 or 24 to 9. It's really only a 2 to 1. Franco, if he gave support, could be canceled by Azania. So just a straight up 2 to 1 on the part of the nationalists. And really, you know, it's not great odds. We've seen how successful the Republicans have been in attacking, and from Franco's point of view, he still has some pilots that are going to arrive next turn, which will allow him to get an air force on map, and then beyond that, he's got a motorized corps that's going to show up in July, August. He still has an artillery division and some land bombers in the force pool to be built. So from the nationalist perspective, they are only going to get stronger if they wait, and as a consequence, they may kind of wait out the summer here until they can get those units on map and kind of really build up their on-map strength here. And then once they get a little bit of an advantage, then press that against the Republicans. Of course, the Italians don't like to hear that, because the Italians want the nationalists to win the Civil War and win it now. But I think they're going to take the nationalists are going to take the better part of valor. What they will do is they will slide the cavalry here over to the coast, just to prevent any Republicans trying to infiltrate up this coast rail line here and turn the flank of their line. They don't want to leave the militia by themselves, so I guess we'll slide that guy there, and then we'll bring Franco up here. Those are the 3 land moves. That's going to hit their limit. Unfortunately, they are really limited by the Italian combined action limit. So just 3 land moves. As you can see, a minor extension of the line and bringing the headquarters up into the center of it. I expect we'll see more of this, just kind of shifting around of positions throughout probably the next couple of turns. And it'll be up to the Republicans if they really want to try and push somewhere and make some attacks. So that's going to do it for the fascist first impulse. That moves us on to the Democrats next. So we'll see if what the Republicans are going to do, as well as the Chinese. The Chinese are going to be calling out their reserves, and we'll see what their response is to the Japanese aggression. Just like we did with the fascist impulse, we're going to start in Asia again with the Democrats' impulse. And just as the Japanese had some reserves to call out, the Chinese do as well. They don't have quite as many. They have a small little garrison division, and then they've got 4 militia units, one for Lanzhou, Canton, Shanghai, and Peking. And then finally they have an infantry army, the 14th Army. So we'll go ahead and get these placed. Remember, these are going to show up face down. The militia are going to have to go in the cities that are on the unit. We've got Peking, Canton, and Shanghai. And then Lanzhou is actually fully stacked. We've got 2 full-size units there, so it'll have to show up adjacent to it. We'll put it there. Now we need to decide where to place these 2 units. First thought would be maybe placing this in Peking to add to the defense, but in doing so, because it's face down, if the Japanese attack, it would provide another +1. We're already going to get a +1 for having the militia that's face down there now. Current defense is 6. That would change it to a 7. I think the best the Japanese, they've got 10 here. They've got 15 to 6 versus 15 to 7. It's still a 2 to 1. No point in giving the Japanese an additional +1. So I think we'll try to find somewhere else for the garrison division here. And then we have a 4-2, which isn't too bad. I think we're going to place this down here in Changsha, because with the Japanese getting a foothold here in Foochow, that is a minor port, which means they will be able to debark other units into that, and the Chinese are going to want to contain that bridgehead before it can expand all that much. So maybe we throw this guy in Shanghai. We try and hold on to Shanghai since we've got 2 factories in there. All right, now with the reserves called out, we can proceed with the turn. We've got no port attacks, naval air missions, no naval movement, no strategic bombardment or ground strike missions, so we're on to rail movement. Let's see, anything we necessarily want to rail. I don't think so. Maybe we want to move the communists up or not. The Chinese, interestingly enough, are not restricted to a combined impulse because of the limited war. That's the Japanese. So the Chinese can and will select a land impulse for their action type, this particular impulse. So that gives them basically unlimited rail moves and land moves. And the question is, what are we going to do with them? Well, let me take a few minutes here to look things over and see what the possibilities are for the Chinese here, and then we'll resume in just a moment. Well, if there's one truism about the China theater, it's that nothing ever happens quickly here. And that's very much the case with this Chinese impulse. It was a big loss here with the Japanese attack. That managed to basically eliminate half of the Chinese nationalist mobile forces on map. They really have just 2 non-garrison units besides Chang. The cavalry corps here, which did move further down into the mountains here, and they took advantage. I think I said they had unlimited rail moves, and that's not true. They have unlimited land moves, but they only have 1 rail move. They railed the army here from Nanning up to Xinan. Again, they would like very much to try to hold on to Peking and the resources up here. Considered having Chang reorganize him, but it doesn't do as much good to have Chang face down, particularly since he's in the front line there. The Japanese can get a 2 to 1 on Chang. It would be interesting to see if they decide to press their luck, if you will, with another low odds attack on him next impulse or even the rest of this turn. The communists, meanwhile, are slowly marching west, or I'm sorry, slowly marching east from Lan Chao, and you can see getting into the mountains has inverted both the warlord and the army that was there. And Mao, meanwhile, presses on with his cavalry and the second army here in Xi'an, trying to get up to the front lines up here. But again, the Chinese can't afford to ignore the secondary front that's been opened here. There's probably not much danger of it expanding this turn, but next turn, all of those Japanese reserves are going to be turned face up, and they still have some transport that can potentially reinforce here at Fuchao and cause some issues down here. The Chinese simply just don't have very many troops on the map right now. Their production did triple with the declaration of war here, or the undeclared launching of this war by China, but that still only leaves them with 3 build points. So they're going to have to rely on the Japanese being limited in doing combined impulses to slow their drive inland, because right now there's just not much in the way of Chinese land forces to prevent the Japanese from basically going where they want and doing what they want in China. So we'll see how this develops. It's probably going to be slow, at least, like I said, until next turn. We get into the summer months and some good weather, and the Japanese are able to reinforce northern China. Here they may have some good prospects for pushing the Chinese back. Just depends on whether or not maybe the communists can get up here and get into some good terrain to form a good defensive line. So we've got our land moves done. We've got our rail moves. There's no air, certainly no land attacks, no invasions or paradrops, air bases, or reorganization. So that's going to wrap it up for the first Chinese impulse. And now we will head over to Europe. And I don't believe there's anything really that the democracies are going to be doing, except perhaps the Republicans in Spain. So let's head over to Spain, see what the Republicans have decided to do. Well, the Republicans are in a bit of a quandary here. They have everything from their force pool on map currently, and they are maybe at parity with the nationalists. They're probably actually a little bit outnumbered if you consider the nationalist garrisons they have back here in the Northeast. And so they're going to have to find a way to maybe try to kill the nationalists where possible. But you've already seen that they've made a couple of low odds attacks that have not gone very well for them at all. They've got no prospect of getting any reinforcements unless they can convince a major power somewhere in the world to give them a unit. Now, there are a couple of international political options, IPOs, that major powers can play that will allow them to support either the loyalists or the rebels. And when they do play those, they have the option to either build units for them, in other words, kind of like lend-leasing build points to one faction over the other, which will allow the Republicans or nationalists to build units that are their own units that are in their force pool. But that's not going to do the Republicans any good, because they have no units right now in their force pool. What they need are more units actually on map. They need a bigger army, and that's going to mean that a major power is going to have to be willing to select the option to support the loyalists, and then, rather than lend-leasing build points to them, actually give them one of their own units. In order to do that, they're going to have to physically transport the unit to Spain for the Republicans, and then that unit becomes part of the Republican force pool, and it's going to remain there until the end of the Civil War, at which point in time the winning faction will decide whether it stays in the Spanish force pool or it goes back to the major power. So there's a bit of a risk in giving a unit to one of these factions, in that it may not be coming back. So that's something that the major powers are going to have to consider, and certainly the Republicans are going to be doing a full court press asking for as many volunteers and additional units as they can get their hands on. It just depends on how willing the democracies, in this case most likely, perhaps the communists, are to seeing that Spain doesn't fall under nationalist control and potentially fall into the fascist camp. So, with all that said, the Republicans are again restricted to the French combined action limits, which is 3 land moves, which they, I think, are going to use actually. We don't have any naval activity, we don't have any air activity, so we're just going to go right to the land move phase. So we're gonna slide this guy in here. We're gonna move Lasagna into the mountains, and then we're going to have the cavalry corps go 2, 3 into here, and those will be the 3 land moves for the Republicans. No land attacks, which means no combat. We'll go to air rebases, which I think they will not do because they did move 1 oil-dependent unit here in the HQ. So they were thinking about rebasing the aircraft out of Madrid, but they can always save that for the next impulse and get that done. I don't think it's going to make a big impact. So other than that, we go to reorganization, of which there is no reorganization to be had. That's going to end the Democrats' first impulse. So the marker is going to advance now to the 3 box for the communist impulse. And the communists, I don't think they did get an infantry reinforcement that they placed in Odessa this turn, but there's really nothing else they want to do. They aren't making any adjustments in the Far East. Actually, they are going to slide 1 infantry army up to the border with Manchukuo, but that's about it for the communists. So it is back to the fascists for their second impulse. I'll roll weather here, and then we'll pick up probably over in Asia with the Japanese. Well, any plans Japan may have had to follow up her big initial victory in North China have been washed away with the rain that is falling in North Temperate. The weather roll was a 6, which gave us storm in the Arctic, rain in North Temperate, fair in both the Mediterranean and North Monsoon, then rain in South Monsoon, and finally fair in South Temperate. There's no addition to the die roll for the next weather roll, but the marker will be moving up 2 boxes after each impulse this time around. Now, if things move slowly in China, they move much more slowly whenever there's rain or stormy weather. Rather than try to do a little something and end up moving any units that are going to be turned inverted, the fascists know that they should be getting, they'll almost certainly be getting at least 1 more impulse here. So the Japanese are probably just content to sit tight this impulse here in China and wait to see if the weather improves before the end of the turn before attempting to do anything. So nothing much to see here in Asia, which means we're going to go back over to Europe and Spain and see if the nationalists are going to be able to do anything. Now recall, Spain is split between the northern temperate and Mediterranean weather zones, so probably the southern or eastern end of the front lines there has some reasonably good weather. We'll see what, if anything, the nationalists decide to do. So let's head over there now. Well, the nationalists do have some shuffling to continue to do along their line. They're not going to do any naval and obviously no air activity, and neither are the Germans or Italians for that matter. So we'll just get right to the land moves here. Again, they're limited to 3, but they are going to move 1. They're going to shuffle this corps here and bring the division. Actually, they're going to bring the division we'll bring the division right there into the forest, and I think that's going to do it. So again, a very short impulse here for the nationalists in Spain, and the marker will move up 2 on the track, and we go over to the Republicans, or actually we go over to the Democrats technically, but since we're here in Spain, maybe we'll keep it right here and take a look at what the Republicans decide to do. They too were shuffling some units around. I think they had some ideas here. They have an infantry corps here in Valencia that they want to move out into the front line. They're going to move it here into the mountains for 2 movement points. Now they've got 8 here, that's 12. They could get a 1-to-1 against this Guard Corps here. Not fantastic by any means. Here the Nationalists have strengthened the eastern end of their line, so by doubling that, that's 4, that's 8, and that would be a 1-to-1 there against both of those units. So nothing really looks all that promising for the Nationalists. I think what they're going to do is probably just, we're going to rebase the Air Force there, and maybe if they're not going to make an attack, actually we're doing this a little out of order, we're going to have the division slide back here with Azania for now. And I think that's going to do it for the Democrat second impulse there. We've got some things to do over in China, so let's hop back over to China real quick. As you can see, the rest of the world pretty quiet right now. And over in China, the Chinese do have, they are doing yet another land impulse. See if we can get the camera set up here. Here we go. And as you can see, the only face-up nationalist units that are not garrison units are Chang and the cavalry here, and they're pretty much in position, but we do have some communists that we can move, so we're going to do that. The cavalry, let's see, or are we? Again, we come back to the issue of rain, and here's our weather line here, so everything north of here is rain. That's going to double all of their movement costs. Do we want to do that and turn them face down or not? Well, I think the Chinese are going to follow the Japanese example and just kind of sit tight and hunker down. Now we have no chance of the turn to end here at the end of the second Democratic impulse, which means it's going to move up 2 boxes to the Communist second impulse. Again, the Communists they're not passing, they're just not doing anything. Although, I wonder if it would maybe be a little bit helpful to their cause if they did pass, because if they passed, it would subtract 2. And since they are the third ideology to go, it's not going to impact any of the initiative modifier. You know what? Maybe the communists will pass, if only to sort of irritate the fascists by disrupting their chances for doing anything in China and perhaps in Spain this turn. So let's go to the end of turn die roll by the communists here. Number is a 0, but since everybody in the ideology passed, that's -2. And the 4 is not going to get it done. So it will continue. And the weather roll for this next set of impulses is also a 4. That's really not good. That's even worse weather than last time. We're going to have snow in the Arctic, storm in North Temperate, rain in the Med, fair in North Monsoon, storm in South Monsoon, and rain in South Temperate. It's going to go up 3 boxes after each impulse this time. And I think the rain in the Med combined with the storm in the North Temperate is certainly, it's already shut down China, and China is going to stay that way. It probably will end up shutting down Spain as well. Let me go ahead and mark the weather updates on the board here and take a look at the situation, see if there's going to be anything to actually show you. And if not, I'll just continue to roll through the turn until we wrap up March, April here, and then just kind of give you a summary of where things stand at the end of the turn. Well, the turn ended actually on that set of impulses with the really bad weather roll. The communists ended up ending the turn, so there's no impact to the initiative die roll modifiers for next turn. Return to base. We just had the Italian transport here finally come home with the 10th Italian Corps there. That's finally at least a year, almost 2 years maybe, after the end of the war in Somalia, or Ethiopia. They managed to get all of their troops back home. They do have one Army Corps in Ethiopia. They're garrisoning it. Nothing happened here in Spain. Nobody even really moved thanks to the poor weather. We've gone through the final reorganization. All of the Chinese and Japanese reserves are now back face up, along with the Japanese units that made the attack early in the turn. And we have just production now to get to. There will be some changes in the amount of production that I think at least a couple of the major powers are doing. I think China and the Commonwealth geared up this turn. So I'll recalculate those and go ahead and build for each of the major powers, and then we'll wrap up with a summary of all of the builds. So I'll see you on the production circle in just a few minutes. Well, to update you on the current production that each of the major powers is producing, now that we've had a number of changes here, especially with so many gear-ups this year. Germany is producing 12 build points per turn and saving in oil. Italy is producing 3 build points per turn while also saving in oil. And Japan is building 6 build points and again saving in oil. The Soviet Union is now up to 8 build points with her recent gear up, and that also does allow her to save in oil. And for the democracies, everyone except China is in fact being able to save in oil. The Commonwealth's production is now 11, France's is 6, the United States stays at 3, and China's has jumped from 1 to 3. So what have they done with all of this increased production? Well, keep in mind that many of the major powers that have geared up this year have had to spend a lot of money to do the gear up, so they're kind of digging themselves out of a hole. But they don't want to stop producing, because now with 2 of the 8 major powers actually at war, the others know that time is getting short and things are beginning to accelerate, so they're not going to necessarily skip a turn of production. But they are also, like I said, trying to get out of that hole and trying to finally realize all of the increased production that the gear up is going to allow them. We'll start off with the fascists, as usual. The Italians are going to start a battleship, and they are also going to build a carrier plane, and that's going to cost them a grand total of 2 build points. Germany is building a carrier plane as well. They are training pilots, and they are building an infantry corps. The Japanese, despite having started a limited war with China, are still maintaining a naval and air-related build plan. So they are finishing a transport here, second cycle for some transports coming out of the construction pool. They are building some convoy points, 1 convoy point. They are training a pilot, and they are also building a carrier plane. So a big turn for fascist naval aviation. That's a grand total of 7 build points for the Japanese. The Soviets, again, they were all the way down to, I think, -9. Their production of 8 brought them up to -1, but they didn't want to miss a turn of production. So they are building something, but it is just 1 garrison unit for a cost of 2. Which drops them down to a -3 balance heading into next turn. Now for the democracies, the French are going to be training a pilot, and they are also building a fighter. That's going to be a total cost of 4. The Commonwealth is beginning work on a transport. They are training a pilot, and they are building a carrier plane to go with it. That's a total cost of 4 for the Commonwealth. China is building 2 militia units, and you can see here is the corps that was shattered in the initial Japanese attack. So the Chinese will be getting 3 land units as reinforcements here at the beginning of next turn. And finally, the last of the major powers, the United States, they are pulling the USS North Carolina out of the construction pool and beginning the second cycle for her for a cost of 3 build points. The Spanish, the Republicans, as I've said, they've got 9 production, but they have literally nothing in their force pool to build, so they are building nothing. The Nationalists have 6 build points. They do have a couple of units there. They are beginning training of a pilot. And again, we'll use the Chi-Com pilot marker there. They're also building a land bomber. So in a few turns, they should have their land bomber on map. And the only thing they have left, that's a total of 5 build points, by the way. The only thing they have left in the force pool is an artillery unit, which they presumably will build next turn unless they suffer some combat losses in May, June. But that's it for March, April. We've seen war break out in the Far East between two major powers, albeit it's a limited war. Got off to a very good start for the Japanese, but a very slow start. Part of that was induced by the weather, and part of it was perhaps maybe the Japanese not quite as ready for this war as maybe they thought they were. But we'll see if they are able to continue pushing deeper into China, whether the Chinese are going to have time to build any kind of defensive line and get some more reinforcements in the front lines before the Japanese overrun certainly northern China. The Japanese are definitely eyeing the not just the resources in China, but also the red factories to improve their own production situation. So we'll see how things unfold there in the upcoming summer turns. May, June promises to be a long turn with good weather. Most places, I think maybe southern China and North Monsoon, we may see some rain down there, and so not much going on down there. But the main action in China, I think right now, is in the north, where the bulk of the Japanese forces are. And that's going to do it for today. Again, as always, really appreciate you watching. Hope you're enjoying it. Take care, and we'll see you next time.